All right, good morning, everybody. I hope everybody's doing well today. My name is Kim Schell. I'm the director of Bisnow for Houston and Austin and the rest of Texas. This is our third annual architecture and design event, and we love doing this event. So glad to see you all. This is our second time in person. Before we get started, I can't do this without all our sponsors, so I'd like to go ahead and thank our sponsors for helping us put this program together. Our sponsors for today are Brave Architecture, Powers Brown Architecture, Moderno Porcelain Works, Core Office Interiors, American Institute of Steel Construction, LJA Engineering, Marathon Fitness, PGAL, Bosch Thermador and Gagno Home Appliances, Garza EMC, and Shaw Contract Group. Can we get a round of applause for all our sponsors today? Great program today. We will start off with our keynote speaker, followed by 2 consecutive panels. So please make yourself at home. Feel free to get coffee as needed. I know everybody has a busy day and also wants to get home before the weather maybe takes a downturn. So we're going to go through this consecutively, but come and go as you please. With that said, as I said, this is one of my favorite events, and the reason why is because everybody speaking today and in the audience all has a part in making Houston the design and shape of what Houston looks like in major projects. And I can't think of any way better to start that off with David Manfredi, CEO, founding principal of Elkis Manfredi. And so I'd like to invite him to the stage to tell us a little bit about this little project you probably have heard of, TMC3 Bio Research Campus. So with that, David's going to come to the stage, and as he comes up here, I'm just going to read a little bit about him. As CEO and founding principal of Elkis Manfredi Architects, David Manfredi has been privileged to work with industry leaders from across the country on a diverse portfolio of planning and building projects. David is committed to the strong belief that the quality of our environment directly influences the quality of our lives, and he effectively advocates for building and protecting vital, sustainable, and durable urban places that bring people and communities together. Places for living, learning, and innovating, like the TMC3 Bio Research Campus project we're going to hear more about today. Can we please get a very, very warm round of applause for David Manfredi? Thank you so much for being here. We're thrilled.
Thank you, Kim. And good morning, everybody. Thank you for the invitation to be here this morning to provide this keynote. I came to Houston on Tuesday night from Boston, where we got buried last weekend in 2 feet of snow from something called a bomb cyclone blizzard, which I think the meteorologists just made up. And now I may stay here for a very long time based on the storm that's going on. And the journey from Boston, Cambridge to Houston, and the planning of this mixed-use cluster of life science research and discovery is really important to the story I'm going to tell you this morning, but it has nothing to do with snow. We often hear innovation and the innovation economy framed as a new phenomenon. But of course, there's been many periods in human history that we talk about as these great moments of innovation. So what makes this generation of innovation different than anything else? And I think it is different. So let me suggest there's 3 things. Number 1 is speed. That is the acceleration of change and progress driven by data, driven by big data. 2 is collaboration, which is a recognition of the extraordinary power of proximity and the mandate for working together. And of course, this relates back to big data and to how much data there is to understand and manage in the world we live in today. And the 3rd may be the most important, and that is openness. Innovation that is accessible, visible, and more public than ever before. And that's for many reasons. We live in an era when information is available to us through all sorts of media, but also we live at a time where some of the traditional rules about the separation of proprietary ownership of information have changed dramatically. See how I do. Okay. So I'm going to start in Boston and Cambridge. Kendall Square, many of you probably know, is a neighborhood in East Cambridge. It's on the MBTA Red Line. The Red Line connects Cambridge and Boston, and the Red Line also connects Harvard and MIT, both of which are in Cambridge. In 1981, Kendall Square looked like that. It was inhabited by MIT's loading docks, that would be at the bottom right of that photograph, by something called the Volpe National Transportation Center, by surface parking lots, empty manufacturing buildings that at one time housed shirt manufacturing, cable, twine manufacturing, nothing very high tech, and predominantly candy factories. All those little hearts that we all traded when we were little kids and on Valentine's Day, they were all made in Cambridge by Necco, which is New England Confectionery Company, and today is the worldwide headquarters for Novartis's life science research. They started in a candy factory at 500,000 square feet, so it's not like it's a startup. And today they occupy about 1.5 million square feet in Kendall Square. So today, that's what that same photograph looks like. And the most remarkable thing is not just the growth and the density, it's that Kendall is home to more than 20 million square feet of translational science and technology. What I mean by that is, I'm not counting the square footage of research on the MIT campus or on any other campus. This is third-party translational science. This is corporate commercial science. 11 of the 15 largest biopharmaceutical companies in the world have important research facilities here. May not be their world research center, but it's, when I say important, it's several 100,000 square feet, several thousand employees. But Kendall Square is, it's not a research park, as we've come to know research parks from the 80s and 90s and the turn of the century. It's part of a city. It is a 600-acre neighborhood. MIT is clearly the anchor of those 600 acres. MIT occupies about 120 of those acres, but it is occupied by big pharma, by big data, by startups, incubators, accelerators, all of those things that make up the definition of an ecosystem. Diversity in size, diversity in science, diversity in people, and maturity. But it's also a real neighborhood. There is a constellation of current research diversity that you see on that screen. You can't read them all, but it is quite a remarkable makeup of institutional research, commercial research, big data, and a few other things thrown in there as well. But if you think about every one of those corporate entities, almost every one has some kind of strategic alliance with MIT. That means that research happening on that campus is being funded by the commercial entities, is being shared with the commercial entities, is being commercialized by those commercial entities in some way. Almost nothing is manufactured here. There's not one hospital bed in Kendall Square. But the majority of the human genome was mapped here by Eric Lander more than 20 years ago at the Whitehead Institute. He's currently President Biden's Secretary of Science. I probably didn't get that name right. And most recently, the Moderna vaccine for COVID-19 was discovered here. The most recent additions are two that I want to mention. Something called the Kendall Square Initiative, which is over 1 million square feet of commercial research, translational science, physically on MIT's campus. Not abutting the campus, not adjacent to the campus, literally on their campus, adjacent to academic research in MIT buildings. But the Kendall Square Initiative is also graduate student housing. It's the preservation of historic buildings. It's retail and restaurants. And the Kendall Square Initiative is now almost complete. We're designing the last building now that will begin construction later this year. The next big development, immediately adjacent to it, just to the north in that rendering, is the Volpe parcel redevelopment. It's 14 acres. It's more than 3.5 million square feet of more commercial translational life science research. It's also market rate housing, street level retail, restaurants, and entertainment. This is a hard drawing to understand, but what we did is we cut the buildings off at the second floor, and we're looking down into the ground floor and everything that happens on the street. It doesn't look like a research park. It looks like part of a city with open space and a network of restaurants, retail, and what we all come to call third spaces. Kendall Square has been called the most innovative square mile on the planet. Some of you may disagree with that, but it's certainly in that competition. So what makes it more than a collection of buildings? Clearly, the science of MIT is the intellectual anchor, but we believe placemaking is the glue. And what I mean by placemaking in the context of an innovation district is really simple. It's making a destination a place that brings people together, that builds community, and that, most importantly, attracts talent. And so how do you do that? And we believe that there are several key principles of planning, and they are the principles that drive all of our planning initiatives around innovation. And I'll try to describe what each one of those means. The first is identity, and it's about making innovation open, accessible, with an opportunity for collaboration that overtakes any concerns about proprietary ownership of information. And that is what's different about this innovation economy. I'll show you some pictures of what I mean by that. It's also about diversity, and in this case, I mean diversity of uses, of mixing innovation, science, with hotels and residential, with retail, restaurants, open spaces. It's about continuity. In the case of Kendall Square or Texas Medical Center, it means using existing fabric, urban fabric, like the Necco Candy Factory or a Ford assembly plant, which is the headquarters of Sanofi in Kendall Square, or the Nabisco Cookie Factory here in Houston, which is the TMC Innovation Center. You all know Jane Jacobs, the urbanist, who famously said, in one of my favorite quotes ever, "New ideas need old buildings." Sociability. It means bringing people together socially through places and programming. Maybe that's the most important one. It's not all about science, but maybe it is, and it's the sociability that is actually an accelerant for the science. Proximity, build things close together on the ground. Walkable streets with active ground floor uses, vibrant spaces, build connections. And mobility, connect to the city, connect to the city's transportation system, which in the case of Kendall means the Red Line, in the case of the Texas Medical Center means light rail. And flexibility, and mostly around outdoor spaces. Think of outdoor spaces as programmable spaces that can accommodate multiple purposes, that are very flexible, that are not overly designed. And then lastly is unity, which is that it has to be managed. The ecosystem, as MIT, as Kendall Square has learned, is actually fragile, meaning that you can build so much value that only Novartis and Sanofi can afford to be there. And what you really want is that mix of young companies, startup companies, the accelerators, the first round of financing companies. And that's what continues to build the place with new ideas. So in Kendall Square, the innovation is open. You're looking at the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard. You're looking at MIT's Media Lab. They are places that are open and accessible. It is about a diversity of uses. There's hotels in Kendall. There's barbecue joints and jazz clubs and music in the basement. You can see Novartis located, that's the old Necco candy factory, and then Sanofi located in an old Ford assembly plant. It took years for Kendall Square to mature, and a lot of lessons learned about what's important to make a place where people choose to be. But Kendall is full of restaurants, bars, music, a grocery store, a CVS, the places of our everyday life. And buildings address the street. Ahead of myself here. Buildings address the street, and they are planned close together, but I'll suggest differently than the Texas Medical Center, where the public realm and sidewalks are full of people, where the ground floors of buildings have commercial uses, and where transit makes important connections, and open space is a place where people gather across different times of the year. And so that's what Kendall looks like today. Those open spaces are places that can host a farmer's market, can host a frisbee toss, can host a family with a picnic on a blanket. And the Kendall Square Association is the kind of conscience and governor of that entire ecosystem. Kendall doesn't look like a research park. It looks like that. It looks like a city with vibrant streets, a mix of uses, and a mix of people. So let's get to Houston and TMC3. And as you all know, the Texas Medical Center is an extraordinary phenomenon. It's a medical city. It's a constellation of more than 60 institutions with world-class healthcare and research. And we think there are several converging phenomenon that have made the TMC3 bioresearch campus an urgent necessity. Number one is, again, the vast proliferation of data, which makes collaboration absolutely essential. And it's collaboration between multidiscipline, academic, institutional, and commercial research teams who are all co-located in one place. All of it essential for the acceleration of drug discovery and drug delivery. And second is the opportunity for institutions to supplement their traditional funding sources with these commercial alliances. What's happened in Cambridge? It benefits the research, it accelerates the science, and it fuels jobs. The first step for TMC, and probably many of you know this story, is that they had to amend their covenants to allow this kind of commercialization and unleash these opportunities for translational science within the medical city. The original covenants did not allow that. So the purpose of, oops, did I get ahead of myself or am I behind? There we are. The purpose of TMC3, and you probably all know what the 3 is for, it's the third coast. The first coast being Boston, the second coast being San Francisco and Silicon Valley, and Houston being the third coast. The purpose is to create collaborative research space that's shared by the founding institutions. Second is cluster these research assets with a strategy that attracts industry partners. Third is the desire to foster this diverse ecosystem, which will attract talent. Fourth is invest in placemaking. Fifth is unleash TMC3 as the physical connection between the North Clinical Campus and the new MD Anderson South Research Campus, or the evolving MD Anderson South Research Campus. And then finally, maximize return on investment for the institutions. Our master planning principles are pretty simple. We want to, and they follow that purpose statement. We want to create synergy between the institutions and industry. We're going to do that with urban forms. I'll show you what I mean by that. We want to develop a mix of uses so it's a real place where you live and learn and work, as well as spend 10, 12 hours a day in a lab. Provide maximum connectivity between all of these parts, and locate street-level uses that engage pedestrians. Build complete streets. Build places where the public realm is really, really important. And it's important, and we all know, if you're involved in this world of science and life science buildings, the ground floors of these buildings are incredibly valuable for lab support, for all the stuff that's going in and out of these buildings. And retail rents will never match the life science rents. But the retail spaces, the restaurants, those clubs and bars are really important to making place. And what's happened and what we've all learned in Cambridge is, yes, you make that sacrifice of those rents on the ground floor in order to make the place that attracts the talent, because it's the talent, the research talent, that drives the whole thing. So, you all know where it sits between the Bayou and Old Spanish Trail, and between the North Clinical Campus and the evolving MD Anderson South Campus. And we believe all of that existing infrastructure, roads and streets and pedestrian connections, as well as the Bayou itself, it really matters. We will make connections between North Campus and that South Research Campus. And we're making an urban grid of streets, creating a kind of walkable environment connected to the surrounding context with street addresses for buildings, and anticipating future development in all directions. You can see where that grid came from. We're really extruding that grid from that surrounding context. We're making connection north-south, and we're making connections east-west, and we're planning blocks of a size and scale that are as much about people walking as it is about the footprint of the buildings. And you think about cities like Portland and parts of Boston in the Back Bay, cities that have more to do with pedestrians than they have to do with cars. We also look to America's great campuses for the kinds of open spaces that bring people together, that create the venues for all of this planned and unplanned interaction. Thomas Jefferson's lawn at the University of Virginia, and the Oval at The Ohio State University. What's remarkable to me about this, if you look at the drawing in the upper left-hand corner, the Oval was planned at the turn of the 20th century, when Ohio State was a few thousand students. And today, that Oval is the same size and feels perfectly sized for a daily population on that campus of 70,000. The planning for TMC3 really began with the spaces between the buildings. These are the important civic spaces. They are or will be accessible, inclusive, usable. They are, we hope, an attraction. Eventually, 6 parks, each different, planned to be programmed, planned to be flexible and changeable, and very active. And an urban form of a grid of walkable blocks, real streets with real names, although we made up the names, but real streets, because streets are connectors, and they bring things closer together on the ground. This is a very early sketch of mine, from which came the term the DNA necklace. It's just kind of a nickname. To me, what's most important is that it connects north and south. It connects to the healthcare campus. It connects south to MD Anderson's evolving research campus. What's also important is that it creates these civic spaces that can accommodate all kinds of everyday activity, and are not exclusive to Texas Medical Center, but hopefully can be an amenity for the entire city of Houston. An attraction for families, friends, a venue for the kite fair, the art fair, the holiday festival. And to this mix of institutional and commercial research, TMC will add a hotel, convention space, apartments, and what's really important, first floor restaurants and retail in every building. The first building, and it is the building that is currently out of the ground and close to being topped off, is the TMC3 collaborative building. If you go out there, you'll see it. And this is, you all know, this is an early stacking diagram. But what's important here is the founding institutions will work side by side in this building with each other and with private industry. The building is about half private industry and half the institutions that you all know, MD Anderson, UT Health, Texas A&M. And this building will be the kind of campus gathering space, the concierge for connections, the venue for lectures and TED Talk space in that atrium in the middle. And on street level will be restaurants open to the public. The big idea is that it's open and accessible, that in many ways this building is a microcosm for the whole campus. That is a mix of stakeholders, a mix of science and discovery, a place for convening. And TMC will build 3 of the 6 parks in phase 1 with this building. They're getting built now. And all of the streets and infrastructure in phase 1. This, we hope, is the mixing bowl for all of these planned and unplanned interactions. The next building, and it has begun construction, is elegantly called TMC3 Industry Building 1. Hopefully it gets another name at some point. And it's being built by a private developer. We've designed both of these buildings, by the way. It will be completed in 2 parts, total more than 700,000 square feet of commercial tenants for translational science, whose work will be accelerated because of its proximity to the work of the institutions, and hopefully because of those strategic corporate alliances. Another view of the same building from the north in the context of those new parks, that necklace of parks. Eventually, the TMC Bio Research Campus will include 11 buildings, more than 6 million square feet, with the founding institutions as well as other institutional research, biopharmaceutical startups, incubators, accelerators, biomedical engineering, venture capital, data science, and retail, restaurants, residential, hotel, and great parks. So, what's next? Can't come and see you and not try to answer what's next. We learn from every plan and from every building. We've worked on university campuses where the schools of engineering, business, medicine, and science each wanted to build their own data science building. The president said, no, we'll build one. But that's the point. The future is not about separate, it's about together. It is a future that is multidisciplined, that connects private and public, institutional and industry, in one campus, in one building, on one floor, with many disciplines all connected. The research is platform or problem-based. And boy, have we had a great example of that with the research around COVID. It was problem-based with all of that energy and resources focused on a single problem. The buildings are designed for spaces and places that support collaboration, that foster connections, and that are convertible, because the one thing that is absolutely certain in this world of science is change. We are tasked as a design community to design buildings that are as agile as the science itself. And we're tasked to plan places that attract talent, because they attract talent because they are integrated with the rest of our lives, with the living part of our lives, the learning part, the playing part of our lives, because they are inclusive, diverse, and open, because they conspire to make places that are magnets where we choose to be rather than we have to be. So, my 15 minutes is up, and maybe a little bit more. Thank you very much. I'm happy to try to answer any questions.
Not a good thing. How many people learned something new from the presentation on TMC3? Yeah, what an amazing project. Thank you so much. And now we will move on to our first panel. And Ryan, if you will introduce yourself and have your panel do the rest, we'll get going.
Thank you so much. Hello, welcome in everybody. Good morning. I just want to let you know, Fernando, that we have an airlift of coffee coming in. So the National Guard's on it. I just wanted to thank the Bisnow team and all of our sponsors for making this possible today. The level of thought leadership that we're able to provide and the networking is truly instrumental in the future of the Houston A&D industry. So thank you all for being here. So I also want to give a big thanks to Sophie, who couldn't be here today, but she put together this program, and I feel the synergy in what we learned from Mr. Manfredi really flows well into the program that we're about to talk to you guys about with Timeless Design. I'm Ryan Diaz with Core Office Interiors. We do fixtures, furniture, and technology in Houston, Austin, and San Antonio. And I want to start with Fernando. If you guys could introduce yourselves and work your way down towards me.
Fernando Bravi. I don't know, is this on? Can you hear me? Fernando Bravi, Bravi Architecture.
Wes Good, Kirksey Architecture.
Stephanie Burrett with Gensler.
Art Chavez with Page.
Jeff Gerber, PGAL.
Thank you all. So our program today is going to focus on designing buildings to stand the test of time and the trends that are here to stay. We're going to kick it off with our first question. So thinking about your favorite example of truly iconic design, what about that project makes it timeless? And what does the history and aesthetics say, as well as the form and functionality?
You want us?
We'll dive right in.
I'm going to read off the teleprompter here.
Let's go ahead and kick it off with you, Wes.
All right. Well, we got a lot of great buildings in this country, but I personally believe there's only a few that really elevate to sort of iconic and timeless design. My favorite project is the Kimball Art Museum in Fort Worth. I visited when I was in college, when I was learning about architecture, and that was over 30 years ago. I've visited it numerous times since, and every time the experience is the same. It's great. It's a wonderful place to be. It's an easy building to pick because it's an art museum. You know, most of us architects are probably not selecting malls as our favorite place to go. But it's simple, it's sophisticated, and it to me embodies what a building could be that could really stand the test of time for the user's experience as well.
You know, Ryan, one of the things that I'll add to the discussion around timeless is sometimes it's not necessarily the actual physical structure itself. It is a lot of what we heard from Mr. Manfredi. It is all about placemaking and a place where people desire to be. And, you know, like your Kimball Art Museum, it's a beautiful facility, it's a beautiful structure, but it's also about the experience of being there. And we often say, at least at Gensler, we're not just in the architecture business, we're in the people built business. You know, we're designing structures and places for people to experience. You know, there's more and more of things that are happening more from an industrial perspective that might be more robotic, more of that artificial intelligence, but for the most part, everything is all about the human experience. And so whether it's Paris or the Barcelona Pavilion or the Menil Museum here in Houston, it's just I think those things, that the experience of the place that you want to go back to, is what makes it timeless.
I think, Ryan, that it also has to do with the prescriptive use of the space. If the less prescriptive, the more timeless it is. Like, for instance, in Houston, the Rothko Chapel, I imagine that it will be the same space for as long as it stands. And we talked about the Pantheon also in Rome. It's been probably the same thing for 2,000 years. You know, the same symbolism of use. When it comes to use, the more complex the building, the less chances are that it's going to stay the same, right? Airports, research facilities change a lot.
This building,
This building,
this space.
yeah.
And so kind of thinking back on the 8 principles of innovation that we learned about this morning, I think that's very synergistic with what we're talking about with timeless design. I know that you guys have touched a little bit on form versus function and how the aesthetic is what truly makes it timeless without having a prescribed function. So kind of thinking about the aesthetic, you know, a small budget doesn't create a bad design. So how does a budget affect the longevity of a project? And where do you allocate some of those resources to improve the timelessness of your designs?
I think it's not the aesthetics or the quality of the architecture. I think it's the level of durability of materials and the level of decay that a building might face over time. That's the only effect that budget would have on the durability of a building, I think.
Well, and it's also the ability of the building to adapt to new technologies, right? So you're always trying to anticipate what you're building. As we're designing for 3 years out, 2 or 3 years out. So you're trying to anticipate what that technology is going to be, right? And so in many ways, we're looking in the crystal ball and saying, okay, well, we understand technology today and how this space should respond to the user, but that's going to change, and it's changing every year. And so you're trying to anticipate something down the road. So it's really important. I think we'll get to this other conversation of having the right voices in the room when you're making those type of decisions.
And I think even with this, more important with a small project budget, is you have to have the best value for that budget. And it starts at the very beginning, and having a conversation not only with your client, make sure the whole team is on the same page about what's the best use of that budget, and makes the first part of the project the most important part to be successful.
I agree with what you were saying. I'm looking out here across the audience, and I see, you know, some of our contractor partners, and it definitely is a team effort when it comes to taking a look at the budget. And you're absolutely right. The sooner you can get the right people, the right voices in the room for a project, the more quickly you can really start to address budget. And I was at a client meeting yesterday. I missed the happy hour last night. I apologize for that, but it was one of those things where the client, he said, one of Stephanie's figures of speech is no dead cats. You know, if you're going to come to a project table and there's an issue, let's talk about it, and everybody roll up your sleeves. It's the contractor, it's our AV consultant, it's our MEP engineer, it's everyone. What can we do to make this successful? Because a tight budget is not an excuse for a bad design. It just simply is not. It just means you need to think of it in a different kind of way. And I think some of our most beautiful projects are the ones that had a tight budget, you know, because it made us think a little differently than what we had done in the past. You should be able to design something beautiful if you have an unlimited budget.
Yeah, I think the budget can have an impact on long-term durability and the infrastructure, and sometimes it's hard to convince clients to spend the money on those things because what they do see initially is fancy renderings and great-looking models, and while those things aren't mutually exclusive, the infrastructure and the backbones of the building are what can cost the most. And so significant dollars still need to be put into that to allow that building to maintain its function and be durable for the 50 years that everybody keeps saying we keep these 100-year buildings for.
It's a little difficult at times too. I think you'll agree here. Depends on your client. You're working for a developer that is maybe planning on flipping the building in a couple of years, 2-3 years. So they're not worried about long-term maintenance. And that makes it really challenging to make those decisions around systems. We want to guide them to a path that, with longevity on selection of systems, but sometimes the pro forma isn't there. It's not based on that. It's based on something completely different. So our role in that gets really, really challenging in trying to push clients to spend the money in the right areas.
Are you saying, Art, that timelessness requires the right client?
It's exactly right.
Well, and then we convince them to spend all the money on this expensive infrastructure, and then in 3 years that infrastructure is outdated. So it may not always be the right choice.
So kind of going back to something that Stephanie said, I believe that when you're planning for a project, you do create these goals and objectives that you have to carry through the life of the project. How do you stay on track with that, and how flexible and agile are you expected to be as the project continues on?
Well, this will be short, but we've been working on projects that change as we design. New things are introduced because the client decides that this new technology will be needed, or this new way of doing things will be needed, so we have to adapt. It's a very fast-moving process now. I think Manfredi said something about the speed of things, and I think that's key.
And we've had the good fortune to be able to be involved in setting budgets for a lot of our projects and be able to have those conversations with the client about what is their vision, do the concept work before budget's locked in, which gives you a much better stage to go create success because everyone's in alignment at that point.
And I was also going to say, we were talking about timelessness, and really what's driving that right now is the flexibility. That's what gives it the timelessness. And if it were a purpose-built facility, it runs the risk of losing its timelessness. So you have to think of what can we do to build in that flexibility? What is this structure potentially going to be in the future when it is no longer serving the purpose that it's serving now? You can look at, if you visit some great historic cities like Savannah, Georgia, for example, and beautiful historic architecture. And a lot of those buildings, thanks to our friends at SCAD in particular, have been converted into other kind of uses, but they've held on to their essence of a building. And so I think that that's important when we're looking at that timelessness, that flexibility, and the longevity of what these structures can be.
Yeah, so most of us work on program-intensive projects where the inside of the building and the users are very integral to the design process. Purging that information out of them, drawing it out of them early in a programming phase. I know most of us have processes that we go through to do that. It's important for us to learn how they currently work, but then to bring innovation into how they can work in the future. Because a lot of our clients say, well, this is how I work, and we just want a better version of this. And for us to truly design buildings that will help advance what they're doing in the building, we have to bring that innovation. And before you can do that, you really have to draw out of the users what exactly they do in the space. How do they use it? And then bring something new to the plan, to the program.
I admire you guys' ability to design for that because I've redesigned my apartment 8 times in the last 6 months. And so one of the things that does exponentially change over time is technology, and it's something that we're really grappling with introducing into the built environment. So what is it that you plan for when coming to the discussion of technology, and are we having the discussion about technology too late in the project?
We can't have that discussion early enough, quite frankly, because it is so integral to everything, whether it's an airport or a hospital or a hotel. I mean, I can't think of a project that isn't impacted by the impact of technology. And if it doesn't come to the table early enough, it's sometimes treated like, I'll even say our graphics and branding sort of component. It's not a tack on. It's not a dotted line on an elevation somewhere that says, okay, this is going to come later. We were looking at a project we were fortunate enough to do for ThyssenKrupp in Atlanta, now TKE, and the integration of technology in that project is incredible. I mean, that's what makes that project what it is. It's a learning environment, it's an innovation environment, and had they not brought the technology to the table at the very beginning as part of programming, it wouldn't have been as successful as it is.
I think more important also is to know that you don't know, as you said, you don't know what's coming. So you have to be flexible to that extreme, to allow for things to happen that you don't know what they are yet. And working with the right consultants also, people that are informed.
But it's not just technology, it's about how people use technology and how they access the technology that makes it successful, right? Because having technology that people can't use effectively isn't ideal.
Yeah, we need to be thinking of buildings like Teslas, where they have capabilities that we don't yet know you can implement. And I mean, you can get your Tesla fixed with just an app update. And if we can think of buildings that way, how do we make them so they're easily updatable and can stay current in the area of technology? That I think that's going to be.
Hopefully, they won't have to be recalled.
It goes back to, again, that planning. We're all saying maybe similar versions of the same thing. It's that early planning and programming and making sure you have the right voices in the room. The technology is changing rapidly, and to Jeff's point, there's tons of applications with no uses, right? So there's lots of technology out there. So you have to make sure that if you're deciding on an application, that the client knows how to use it and what it's going to cost, how you're going to build it, what it means in the long term So it's just making sure that you have the right consultants in the room. That is so critical. You got to look for those experts. Many of them are here in this room. Whether it's Merrick Brothers talking to them about wall solutions and a bunch of other assembly methodologies, or Teresa on fitness equipment, right? You know, so there's a whole bunch of the whole spectrum of consultants and great voices that are out there that need to be plugged in.
And also the other piece to that, Ryan, is the desire for individual control. When you walk into, even if you go into the fitness center and it knows that you're there and it knows that you like things set a certain way, or you walk into your office and it knows you want a temperature set a certain way, or you walk into a hotel room and the lights are set at a certain level, it's amazing what technology can do. And again, just kind of going back to what we've been saying, is like you just cannot talk about it early enough in the process.
Yeah, the last event that we were blessed to be a part of was the Healthcare South event, and they talked about the technologies and how it's changing when a doctor can walk into a room and it automatically knows who the doctor is and what their patient's going through, and the time saving for that could save lives. And so what applications are we seeing out there now that's changing the way that we interact with the built environment on kind of the more public corporate side? I know, obviously, as we're thinking through the future, automated cars, garages are kind of going away.
Next question. Ask Fernando.
Well, I'm going to just take us in a different direction. I'm going to moderate it. I think something I've been wanting to say, I don't know if you're going to take us there, but I think timelessness these days has to do with use and the symbolism of buildings. Technology is one thing, but also, and we saw it on some of the projects we saw earlier this morning, that projects have to be welcoming to a broader array of tribes more than before, right? And we saw the uproar that the AIA and our organization, most of the architects in the country, raised when the previous administration, I'm not going to get political, passed a decree that all buildings had to look like back in the Roman days, and stopped short from demanding that they were all designed by one architect, and they were. I mean, we changed that, right? Because public buildings specifically, have to be more inclusive and more open and more welcoming, and more tender to the needs of society. I think that's important. that will make them timeless, I think.
I think what's interesting is as we move forward here to see how technology still allows for this natural bumping into knowledge. You know, classrooms, corridors, the corridors of our colleges and universities are where we learn the most. When we ran into a colleague or a student, a friend, a buddy, we discussed a problem, we met at the coffee shop and came up with solutions. You learn more in corridors than you do in classrooms.
That's exact. That's what I was saying. And the projects we saw. The most important space is not the specific
exactly.
program, but what happens in between.
So how does technology support that public realm in supporting this natural sort of bumping into knowledge? And that's going to be really interesting, because right now we're kind of on our phone, and this natural sort of connectivity that we've been accustomed to is migrating. I don't know, metaspace, I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, that's something we talk about a lot, particularly in the workplace realm, is that loss of the potential for accidental learning, because you're so tied to your technology that you are not taking the time to really have that human interaction. And that is really where we are learning the most from one another, and making sure that we do allow for the technology is really just a tool. No offense to everyone out there, but it's just another tool for to make a successful place. But it doesn't take the place of the human interface that takes place.
It is dangerous in a way what's happening. You go, Starbucks are turning, they don't have chairs anymore, or sofas. You pick up with the app and go. I went to my Starbucks and I said, where are the chairs? Are you putting them
lost
back
its
after
heart.
COVID? No, we're remodeling. It's all just call and pick up.
But one thing I say, I always tell myself, I can't old think this, because, you know, my kids, for instance, they're like making friends across country lines, and they're playing games, and they're doing this, and they're interacting on a social level that I never was exposed to, you know. And so it's quite unusual, so we have to think outside the box here and can't compare it to how we socialize or how we bumped into knowledge, but rather, how is technology going to support this new way of bumping into knowledge? Because it's quite interesting. It's fascinating. I mean, I was eager to
nothing like hugging a friend, though.
What?
Nothing like hugging a friend.
Oh, no. There's nothing like a warm hug, for sure.
Well, but the other thing that I think we're forgetting to talk about here is, you know, it was mentioned on one of Mr. Manfredi's slides. He listed it as the word unity. And as I read through that, I read it more as the word culture. And so you want to make sure, whether it's an electronic, an e-culture that you're growing, or it's the culture of an office, or a culture of an organization, or the places that you're making, you cannot forget the importance of culture. And again, it's one of those intangibles, but it'll be the thing that pulls people back and makes it a place that they desire and want to be. And you have to have culture as a part of that conversation.
On one hand, we say that we're all disconnected because of technology, but there is a huge movement back. Every project that was talked about today and all of the new projects that are being developed here are all people-centric and interactive-centric. I was asked last year by a developer, why do I go to the mall? I'm like, I go to the mall if there's a store I need to get something from and leave. But I go to City Center to hang out, walk around, get dinner, go, you know, to people watch, to interact, to have that interaction. And so there's a huge movement back towards that. Maybe the big box retail stores are going to go away because people can order stuff online, and maybe it's smaller, you know, outlets that you interact with, and then you go order what you want online. But I think there seems to be a huge movement back to creating places where people interact, even if they're sitting at the table looking at their phones.
I would agree with that. And, you know, I'm a huge proponent of creating culture. And I know kind of the death of the public space that we've seen recently has been kind of because of our lack of culture, our lack of public interaction. So how is it that we build flexibility and choice into these spaces to create more of that culture, to get people coming back into the public space?
I think it goes back to a few things that have already been mentioned. The spaces in between, there's a lot more focus on that. So while you might go to a place for one thing, it's the spaces in between, the experience you have along the way. I know people still like to pull up to the front of a retail shopping area and just go straight in the store and come out, but But in a nice place, you're fine parking in a garage and walking through a nice environment and experiencing art and restaurants and bars and shops along the way to whatever you were planning to do. You're probably going to stay a little bit longer, you might spend a little more money, and you might interact with people that you hadn't planned to interact with.
It's a lot about choices too, right? Different people want different things in different times of the year. They're with their family, if they're by themselves, and you just have to be able to accommodate all of that.
Fernando, do you have anything?
I was going to say that, yeah, again, the danger of using technology too much for everyday experiences is that we're being fed what the algorithm thinks we like, and then we end up engaging with it, right? That's the danger. But there's nothing like, going to the supermarket if you're into cooking and picking your own tomatoes rather than ordering online. I think we have to be careful about not losing some of those things.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with one of my broker friends, and he said, please, Stephanie, tell me that Office is not dead. And I said, just look at this event. People want to be together. They want to collaborate, and we know that when you get together and you collaborate, innovation is tenfold better. Gensler just recently released our design forecast, and if those of you who haven't seen it, please take a look at it. It's on our website. It's open to everybody. But there are some tremendous metrics in there that really support the idea behind what does it take to be a successful organization. One of the key things is that collaboration. And I told him, I said, Office isn't dead. It's hardly. It's quite the opposite. It might be a reallocation of how some of the spaces have been used. People may be willing to take a smaller desk, one, so they can have their own individual desk now, but you may need to layer in more collaboration spaces, more conference rooms, that type of thing, just so you can bring everyone back to the office and use it the way that they want to. And the same goes for looking at hotels. People are coming back, but maybe the little villa suite idea. And we worked on the Margaritaville in Conroe, and we thought, oh man, this is going to be terrible. It's opening right as the pandemic is starting. The staycations hit the roof, but their little villas, the place where people could have their own individual space, at least at that time, was the thing that people were really attracted to. And a lot of clients started talking about, okay, let's rethink. What does it mean to bring people back in a different kind of way? Not that the pandemic and COVID is going to drive everything for the rest of our lives, but it certainly has given us things to think about when we design things in the future, and that variety and the way we make places for people to come together. And it's a very, there's a matter of opinion, there's a diversity of requests, and I think all of us as designers given us a new way to think.
Yeah, we were in the middle of designing a headquarters for a local group here when the pandemic hit. And they shelved the project for a few months, and they asked us, we kept working, but they asked us, mainly our task was, what's coming, what's going to happen after this? And the main takeaway from our thinking and research, and we put a report together, was that things were going to go back to where they were, because they were in one way, in the way they were, because it worked, and we wanted it like that. We want to work in a collaborative way. We want the flexibility. We want to be able to work from home if we have to, or remotely, or use technology, but there's nothing like, at least in our industry, working together. We couldn't do, we did it for a year and a half, and it was a disaster. And people, by their own choice, started going back to the office.
I think there's another strange aspect around technology and performance. Technology is allowing us to look at how and where people perform, and it's kind of good, but it's also scary, because if you're invited to a Zoom call, it's because you have a voice and you're needed in that. And so it's very obvious technology is bringing together the voices that are important on a discussion. And so when you're left out, are you left out for a reason? Are you left out because you were overlooked? Or, and that's the same for a lot of other softwares. You look at, whether it's Revit or you look at something else. You have an assignment, and it's amazing how it's underscoring and bringing some focus to performance. I think that's going to be interesting to track moving forward, and how we use it. I don't think it's the sole way to grade someone. I'm just saying that it's there, and it is something that's being used to judge performance.
So I know that we all think that we've learned something over the last 2 years, but kind of closing out, thinking of how we've changed, are there trends that are here to stay? Have we actually learned anything over the last 2 years? And looking to the future, is the industry ready to accept some of those changes?
Well, Ryan, I think we've learned that humans are incredibly resilient. We've known that. I mean, we've survived on this planet for many, many years. But during this, I think if nothing else, we've learned how adaptable and how quickly we can become our own help desk if we need to, and and how often and how quickly we can become more open-minded around a different way of working. And I've said before, don't let a perfectly good pandemic go to waste. We've had lots of really good opportunities to make lemonade out of lemons on this one. And we've learned a lot about how we can work. We were already seeing people wanting more flexibility, wanting to be able to work remote, and the pandemic put that pedal to the metal, and it forced things to happen a lot quicker, and I think that's a good thing. We're just able to do, because we were already starting to see those desires, those wants and wishes happen, and it was just a matter of just accelerated it and made it get here that much quicker. And I watched some of the people I work with, and I thought, man, I wish I could have done that when I was 25 years old, given the flexibility, the way that they're working. And it's not just us, it's across our clients too. And trying to help them wrestle with how do we live and work and adapt to this very, very hybrid model that we're in now. And all of us have gone through this such an accelerated pace that we just have to catch up and give ourselves some protocols, and everybody's protocols will be different, but what works best for one organization may not work best for the other. But we're in that sort of infancy of, okay, what do these protocols look like? What is our behavior going to look like? And what is, at the essence, our culture? And how is that going to impact us as an organization?
It was a little bit of a training drill, right? That we now know that if it happens, and it's somewhat like that, we can deal with it to a certain extent. And most firms that were up technologically were ready to do it, to go home. Our people, and I imagine yours, picked up their computers, and the next day they were working from home. So I think it was just a training drill. I never thought this could happen. People tell me, you never watch movies and it happens all the time. I honestly never ever thought that this could happen, and it happened. And so we're a little more ready to react.
Yeah. All of that, ditto on all that. The thing that's interesting, though, there's a concern that I have around our industry is what this means for transfer of knowledge. And I think that we could all say there was probably a tremendous amount of efficiency around tasks being done at home, or wherever you chose to work during the pandemic, or work from home, whatever have you. But what if we were able to measure the transfer of knowledge, that bumping into knowledge that you hear when you're sitting next to somebody that's working out an issue with somebody else and you're just overhearing it, or you talk about a problem, you talk about an issue that's come up and you come up with some ideas about how to solve it yourself. That happens in a space where you can get those warm hugs that Fernando is so eager for. And so what happens? How do you measure this transfer of knowledge that keeps us all competitive and marketable? And I'm sure there's a technology response to that, but I'm not aware of it just yet.
Totally. That was my biggest pain was our youngest people that had just joined the firm, had a few months of experience, and they're not in the soup hearing what's happening. Most of the training is passive. It's by hearing, seeing, And
on a lot of levels, it's not fair to them. It's not fair.
Exactly.
You need to be learning these things in the office.
So get back to
it's a
work.
struggle. Yeah, I mean, if you could get them, but you got other people recruiting them saying, "Hey, you can work from anywhere."
They were the first ones to go
always.
back to the office, by the way.
We need to make a pact that we're going to tell everybody they have to get back to work.
Yeah. Done. We were already there. In a very nice way.
I will say, as a representative business leader here, that the radical change that happened was forced on us, and we hadn't planned for it. We adapted pretty well. I hope that it allows us to be more open to radical change that we might innovate and plan for, rather than just, so when someone comes up with a crazy idea that you're like, well, we would never do that in our industry, that we pause for a moment and say, hey, could this be a real pivoting moment for how we work? And that we're just more open to that. Because I think if someone had said, we're going to do an experiment, we want you to go back to your office and tell everyone to go home tomorrow and don't come back for months, we'd go, well, nobody would do that. Why would we do that? And so, but we did, and things worked out. Most of us, survived, and some thrived, and I just hope that mindset sticks with us for a while.
There's this one thing that I did that absolutely did suck. That's a technical term. About working from home was that some folks in leadership roles would send out an email or a text or a message and expect a response right away. And so people felt that they were always on call. And that was disastrous for many. So that was the bad side of this flexibility work from anywhere, is this tendency to feel responsible and have ownership and accountability over your role on the team, and try to manage, like, wait a minute, it's like 11 o'clock at night. Don't I deserve to some sleep, or do I need to get up and answer this? So that was challenging, So there were some people in our office that were eager to get back into the office for that reason.
I think we can blame Amazon same-day delivery for that immediacy need.
There you go.
Any last thoughts for the audience, y'all? All right. Well, thank you all.
Everybody give Fernando a hug on the way
Yes.
out.
He needs a big warm hug.
Everybody leave the
I love it. A lot of breaking news. Thank
No,
y'all
I mean,
so much. If our second panel can make their way to the stage, thank you. Big round of applause to our first panel. Good morning, everyone. If you'll make your way back into the room, if you'd like, and get some coffee, we are ready for our final panel for today. Thank you all for being here. We are just about to get started. We love networking. If you'd like to network, please feel free to do that in the networking room that's right next door. But we're going to get started with our very great panel. So Sheila, if you will introduce yourself, and then have the rest of your panel do the same. We are. David, we're all set with mics up here? Yep, okay.
Testing. Are we on? Great. You guys hear me? Good morning. Thanks for being here. Just a few introductions. I'm Sheila Condon, co-founder of Clark Condon. We're a landscape architecture firm for the past 36 years in this region, working with many of you in the audience and many of our panelists up here. So I'm glad to be here to be part of the conversation. So if you guys would each, maybe we start with you, Young, introduce yourselves. And I would like you to also, since we're going to talk about some of the different niches that this group, this panel is very diverse, and they do very different kinds of things, including suppliers and designers. So if you could also just elaborate a little bit on how you got to your niche, as well as a little bit about yourselves.
Totally. Good morning, everybody. This is Yang again with Philo Wilkie Partnership here in town. We are a Houston-based firm specializing in healthcare and health science projects. And we've been serving clients all over across Texas for almost 40 years. So our clients include large hospitals, institutions, even private clients.
Hi, everybody. Mide Akinshade here. I am the design director for Perkins & Will. It's an international architecture firm that does projects across various sectors. Our office here in Houston primarily is noted for healthcare projects, as well as science and technology, but also some corporate, commercial, and civic projects. I'm a new resident of Houston, and I'm happy to be here with you guys.
Hi, everyone. I'm Komal Kotwal with HOK. I'm our sustainable design leader for specializing in health, well-being, and equity. As many of you know, HOK is a global architecture, engineering, and planning firm. Been around for over 55 years, and even in the Houston market for over 35, 40 years. So excited to be here and discuss various topics with this group.
Good morning, everyone. I'm AJ Brenneman with Powers Brown Architecture. I'm a partner with the firm and I lead our design group as well. My focus with the firm is working in our public sector, growing our public sector projects, especially in the Houston area. We've made our name for ourselves in this industry. Our niche has been really just staying true to our roots. So founded in '99, our founding partners had a vision to make sure that design was evident in every project type we worked on, no matter the project type. And we're very well known in this industry for our innovations in tilt wall as a construction type and really just maximizing the design potential. We're very proud that we've helped change the landscape of industrial architecture over the last 20 years. And taking those innovations in a construction type into other product types as well, including office.
Hey, good morning. I'm Mike Boucher. I'm with Moderno Porcelain Works. It's kind of an unfair question because we kind of built our business on a niche and kind of filling a gap in the marketplace. So we're a fabricator installer. We're 100% dedicated to the execution of large format porcelain. Our executive team saw, years ago this dynamic developing within the marketplace where the technology was available to manufacture these beautiful materials in these larger formats. But your traditional stone fabricators typically didn't really want to play in that space, right? The material there was a lot of pull from the design community, architecture, and consumers, but there was no one really to own that. And so that's kind of how we came about.
Great, thanks. So we heard a lot of interesting things already this morning, and I'd like maybe to build on a couple of other things from your individual practices. We heard right off the bat from our keynote speaker about the idea of how innovation is affecting us and how speed and data influence us. And then also there was some discussion as well on the last panel about collaboration. So I'd like you to maybe each of you to touch on a little bit about where do you get your inspiration for innovation? How do you bring innovation into your practices? And talk a little bit about that importance of how does that connect to collaboration, whether it's with other consultants, whether it's with clients. So a little bit about innovation and your collaboration approach. Mayday, you want to start? Would you like to start?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. I think when it comes to innovation, obviously, as thinking human beings, we're all pretty smart, especially in our industry. We all have things to contribute. But I think with regards to how Perkins & Will run the practice, I was just talking to Komal here about her role as a sustainability leader at HOK. How at Perkins & Will, the idea for innovation and collaboration all comes under this umbrella of living design, of how we approach our project as a collaborative, all-inclusive approach to designing, right? Pretending, or not pretending, actually acting as if designing the environment which buildings are part of as an ecosystem. And what does that ecosystem contain, or what are the characteristics of an ecosystem? It has to be able to be resilient, it has to be sustainable, it has to be inclusive, right? So under that sort of general umbrella of how we approach design, I mentioned the inclusivity part, and I'll make maybe an anecdotal example. We were designing a project once when I was at HOK, actually. And this project was in Riyadh, in Saudi Arabia. And it was a general master planning project, and a component of it was a mosque. And I'm not a Muslim, but I was tasked with designing this very special mosque on the campus. And as a young designer, I was very excited. There were other components to it that I was designing. I brushed up on everything relating to Islam and the practice of that religion, understanding that different countries and different sects actually pray very differently. So, did the research on my own, did a sketch. We're getting ready for presenting to the representative group from Saudi Arabia that came to the office. And I remember right before the presentation, I'd done this really sketch that I thought was really cool that captured the essence of the mosque. And somebody tapped me on the shoulder and said, "We have to remove that sketch." And I was like, "What are you talking about? It's a great sketch." No, we have to remove it before we present it to the client. We took it off, and after the presentation, I was like, "Well, why did we take that sketch out?" It was like, "Well, you'd sketched this interior of this mosque, and you showed people praying, and you're showing them from behind, showing their feet, which in that religion is actually, or in that part of the world, it's akin to being blasphemous, right?" But the person that told me, again, talking about collaboration and where innovation comes in, was somebody that was from that part of the world, right? Which is the inclusive part, that having people from all walks of life work on a project brings, which is collaboration, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But it also brings innovative ways of different ways of seeing projects. So I just use that as an anecdotal example of how, again, under this arc of living design that Perkinsonville operates
living
on,
design
that
is.
innovation and collaboration is well built within that.
Yeah, that's great. Kamal?
I think we look at it from the umbrella of the spaces we design. Really, it is about design for change, right? And when you think about it, you're impacting the lives of people in different ways. People sort of react to a certain space. They feel a certain way because of they react and feel a certain way because of the space they are in, and to a large extent. So I think looking at it from understanding and that the spaces we design actually change lives of people and impact them, and that is really the focus. That's when you start looking at it from that lens, you look at it. Everything you do is about innovation when you look at it from the lens of making change.
Mm-hmm.
And great project, by the way.
Yeah. Mike?
Yeah, I guess our experience with innovation was really, it was kind of bred out of necessity, right? So kind of tying back to the first part, like a niche, right? Like kind of by definition, this niche exists because there's some kind of barrier, right? There's some kind of challenge. So other people say, and I'm going to shy away from that. And so once we accepted that challenge, right, got real comfortable with that, we understood that we had to do things differently to scale it, right? Look, there's a lot of great craftsmen in our world that do great stonework. But to be able to do this at scale, like our vision is like 60 locations across the United States, right? We want to be able to service every major market. So to do that, you've got to think about new ways and processes that you can deliver a great experience. So the technology that we use to fabricate pieces on they are not from the stone world, right? We found that machinery typically doesn't work for what we're trying to do. The processes that the job flow, the life cycle of a project, for example, that's all kind of been reinvented, right? The way that our CAD programmers, take renderings and the measurements from our technicians, and then set that expectation with the client. So that's kind of where our innovation we kind of had to work with this material and deliver it in a way that was like efficient and profitable and all that good stuff.
Great. AJ?
I think for us, regarding innovation, it would be how we as a firm adapted to the changing markets. So coming out of the Great Recession, what could we do to stay viable in our market sector? A lot of people were wanting to build, but lending and just the cost of projects in general, or people going to be leasing stuff, how could we help with that? So one of the things we did with our research in tilt wall construction was working with collaboratively with our consultant teams, structural engineers especially, and our general contractors. How could we produce an office product that the market could support, based on, just the different metrics that were out there, trying to get people back into leasing and office space at the same time. So we were able to innovate, this Class A office product that could be delivered with a different construction type, really working with the new pro formas that the developers were having with the new lending requirements.
Great.
All right, I think when we talk about innovation, we always thought about technology the first. So, we do healthcare design a lot. So talking about innovation, I think there's a culture shifting. the old-time hospitals are really designed centered around illness. Like you come to a healthcare facility for treatment. So the healthcare facility is designed around that. There's nothing wrong about that. But recently, especially these 2 decades, I think more and more researchers, architects realize that besides the illness treatment-centered design, there's also, we need to talk about stress of patients. The stress from illness, of course, that's number one. Then stress from the situation, stress from the environment. You come to a hospital, let's see, that's not your home, not your office. The stress is also from that. So how we design a new facility, a healing environment that is really people-centered, I think that's the most innovative thought I've seen in healthcare design.
I appreciate that. I have come down with the white coat syndrome problem in the last couple of years. So my blood pressure goes up the minute I walk into the doctor's office, and they want to stick me in the hospital. Anyway, sort of related to that, and Kamal, I know with your focus on sustainability, some of the other things though, what's happening in your practices with focus on climate, carbon footprinting, the equity conversation that we are all talking about in every walk of life, and you can, Mr. Manfredi mentioned this in a different way about diversity, so diversity of place, but how are those aspects affecting how you guys are approaching your design? How is that changing the way you start or work through a design process? Want to start?
Sure, I'll start. I think I can say that the last 2 years, for better or for worse, but have been a perfect storm where we've understood really the importance of health in the built environment. That's one aspect of it. And where I'm bringing it back to climate is we've also realized that climate is not an environment issue. It's a people issue, right? It is affecting people all over the world, no matter where you are, who you are. It is affecting minorities even more. So I think that's the biggest change we've seen as a practice that has always focused at sustainability in our DNA, but really moving that conversation to sustainability for all, for the communities that we touch, bringing in equity in that piece as we're doing that. Yeah. Climate is not an environmental problem anymore. It's a human problem. It is about us. It is about how doing less or conserving is not going to get us where we need to be. Giving back and actually regenerating or sort of generous design is what we call it, is what is going to get us there. So that's really moved our conversation the past 2 years.
Yep. Anybody want to add in on that?
Yeah, I actually, it's a brilliant point about how the issue of sustainability puts us all as humans at the dead center of it all, right? We are the primary reason the planet is warming up. The planet is going to do fine without us, by the way. Like after we're gone, the planet's still going to be here. I was reading a research or something that came on my social media a couple of days ago that showed some blooming flower that they found fossilized in amber from like 200 million years ago. And the scientists were shocked that it still looked like a flower today, so the plants are going to be fine, right? And I think when it comes to this idea of sustainability, how, we center our practice around it, we, again, look at it holistically. It's not just about, we are at the center of it, but how are we affecting animal life? How are we affecting plant life? How is what we're doing affecting everything as an ecosystem? There was a project that we were working on with NIH, Chimp Haven, which created this sanctuary for primates that are used in research. Once they're sort of done with it, just keep them in a lab. And we know primates, kind of like human, they age till like they're 80, right? So some of them have been in these research facilities for decades. And Perkins and Will was sort of involved in creating this sanctuary for these animals so that they can at least live the rest of their life after we're done with them, right? We've collected the data and done the research on them. But again, it kind of shows this trend, which I hope is an everlasting one, of us all just looking beyond ourselves, our selfish selves, I'll say, and care more about the animals that and all the other inhabitants of the planet, right? So looking at it again broadly under this live and design topic is one of the reasons I'm quite excited to be working at Perkins as well, because we sort of look at everything holistically.
So, go ahead.
If you don't mind, yes.
Please.
I remember when I moved to the state of Texas about 20 years ago, in the year of 05, if I was not mistaken, that we had hurricane, not
Carla.
Okay, anyhow,
Maybe? One
Katrina,
hurricane.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Katrina.
So, of course, everybody was panicked because it's hurricane, and I was told you're lucky because you don't see this in about 100 years because this is a 100-year hurricane. Then we have Ike, we have Harvey, and I think we're lucky in the way that we're seeing so many hurricanes and the extreme weather conditions and that. But I think for the city of Houston, let's see, it's really raising the concerns and the awareness of our owners and also our officials. We're revising the code. Now the new building has to be 100-year plus 2 feet. And I think a lot of our clients are taking that very seriously. Healthcare providers and even our community healthcare providers, they have emergency generator above floodplain. They design space not just for their facility, also for the community. If there's loss of power, this and that, the community has somewhere to be. So I think this is really actually a good thing for the city of Houston.
I would say that in a lot of our projects with that exact example of elevation and having things to be built up, it is really causing our group as landscape architects working in that public space to really think about how to do it really well and not have it be, just sort of stuck up. You can all drive through all the neighborhoods that were flooded and see a mid-century modern house that somebody just put on stilts. Or you can look at a house that was designed to take this impact, or a building, whatever it is. So really working with it and using it that's another driver of innovation. We have one institutional project that never used to do a whole lot with their landscapes, but because they had to put the building up 4 feet out of the ground, we got to design all these beautiful terraces and new outdoor spaces that weren't really gonna be there before. They would have just sort of plopped the building on the ground. So some of it can push us to new ways of doing things. What about just other resources that you're using and considering and that you're experimenting with to push your own design trends? What other resources are you utilizing? AJ, you had some comments on this the other day.
I think the thing right now that we're kind of working towards, and I'm sure many of you are dealing with it too, is just the climate we're all in as far as availability of materials and cost escalations over the last 2 years. So for us, it's been, what can we do to change the projects that we're currently working on to keep things moving forward, especially on, some of our developer-driven projects, because it's speed to market, but at the same time, you don't want to be slowed down by a lead time issue, related to steel. Steel's the big one. So there's been things that we've done, again, with research with our structural engineers to look at, just how are we structuring roofs now? Where we would typically do bar joists, we're looking at other solutions with wide flange beams instead. A few years ago, the costs on those were reversed. Now you can get one cheaper than the other, and the lead time again it's on your side. Looking at it from a design standpoint, just one project in particular for a nonprofit group that we're working with. Again, there wasn't a whole lot of money there, and the building was originally designed, conventional steel structure building. Again, the lead time wasn't on our side. The cost escalation just wasn't going to let the project work. So one of the things we did, again, working closely with our structural group and contractor, was converting that to a pre-engineered metal building structure, and really, changing some of the details, but still letting the life of the design that we had originally presented to the client still be expressed.
How about anybody who'd like to? I'd like to hear what you guys are thinking about. I think with Mr. Manfredi's comments about speed and data. So you've all touched a little bit about that, but if you could elaborate a little bit more on what kinds of data are you watching? What are you focusing on, and how does that then maybe change your approach to solving a design problem for a client? Anybody want to start? Mike, you want to start?
I'm going to bow out of that one, actually. No, I mean, when you talk about design and our contributions to design, mostly, what we're trying to keep someone's vision intact, right? When we're fit and finished, right? We're coming in at the end, all the bones are there, and we're trying to execute on someone's vision, right? Next year we'll be the largest buyer of large format porcelain in the world. And so that gives us kind of an advantage, right? You get to an opportunity and there's a supply chain issue, being able to procure those materials directly from a manufacturer versus going through various distribution networks, that helps with that. But as far as using data to help with design, I do what she tells me to do.
Kamal's going to tell us.
She's the boss, yeah.
So data is a big component of design right now. In my world, we always depended on energy data, but it's moving on to data of how people are behaving in a space. There has been a lack of that in the past, and just understanding or making people feel comfortable in a space, right? Air quality monitoring, that was not a thing and now everyone wants to know how they feel. So data is driving transparency, I think. Data is driving design because we are leaning on data and analysis to make design decisions. And then data is driving performance because we now know how our buildings are performing and be able to change them in real time. So I think it starts at the design process, it influences the design, it gets into operations, and it becomes like a feedback loop. So I think it's really important how we use that data to actually drive design and performance.
I guess as a project designer, I completely agree with everything you said. How to sort of gather data, mine data, synthesize data to use. For me personally, as a designer, I sort of look at data from through an algorithmic lens, right? I don't want to use the word movement, but there's a trend now, even if that's the right word, in design where things used to be computer-aided design, right? Like first it was drafting by hand.
Right.
It sort of evolved to computer-aided design, CAD.
I never got to the computer design part.
A straddle world. And now, because of data, we're now sort of seeing how algorithms can help shape, forecast, and create places. There's for architects and the nerds in the crowd, there's a software that we use in terms of designing Grasshopper, which is a plugin for a modeling software, Rhino, that even at my age, and I'm not going to age myself, I kind of forced myself during the pandemic to learn it because I was just like, this is such a potent and powerful tool in terms of not just to create fantastic shapes and whatnot, but that data aspect of it, the fact that you can design a building and build into that design process ways of sort of scheduling, right? That you can tell how many panels are on this building and where each one is. And you can attach a software to it in case one of them doesn't perform well and you need to replace it. You don't have to rip out the entire wall. You know specifically where that tile is. I see that. I think once I started scratching that itch and started seeing how potent and powerful this is, and I was telling the younger designers in our office to kind of think of that aspect of data, algorithmic design, the way a doctor would look at a stem cell, right? That a stem cell has so much potential to become whatever, right? Whatever stimuli or whatever shapes it into, being your arm or being your heart or whatnot.
Right.
And in algorithmic design, it's kind of similar where you can sort of create these parameters, really, around design, targeted in a way that you can influence that data to become what you need it to be, just in the same way a stem cell could become something else. So with that, I see that as, again, that's how I sort of approach data when it comes to design, just seeing how powerful it is, as was just mentioned.
If I may just add to that, I think we're in a world that we're not lack of data, we're probably having too much data. I think the challenge is how to analyze the data. And for instance, I was working on a healthcare master plan about 10 years ago, and it's one of the largest healthcare providers here in the Houston area. They hired a very professional firm to do analysis and the data available to project that in the next 20 years, we're seeing probably 1 million of population increase here in the Houston, just Houston itself. Then, you have to use that data. Then you get data from somewhere else, like you study how many, one licensed bed can serve how many population. And I think nationwide it's 330 people per licensed bed. You're increasing this 1 million population, then how many beds you need for the entire Houston area? If you start first, other than your competitors, you're taking advantage of that situation. So I think it's more than data, it's the analysis of the data that is more important.
Yes. What about how this idea that we talked about earlier, and it came up in the last panel, sort of collaboration? I'd like you guys to kind of answer the same question. How has it changed, let's say, in the past several years, maybe not just to do with COVID, but just in your practices where this is, again, coming from a landscape architect. So when architects were, you guys have been in charge a lot, right, on projects? And I think what we heard a little bit earlier was sort of the shifting of the collaboration and who makes up those teams, and how early do you get those people in the project? So the question is really, who do you bring in? When do you bring them in? And how does that start, and has that changed significantly in the last few years? You want to start?
Yeah, I can start first. So I think as early as possible, always.
We like that answer.
That is beneficial to both the design team and also the owner. And also one trend that we're seeing recently is since we're dealing with the most complex project type, and I think besides the typical AE team, we're seeing more like a low voltage, and also we're seeing the involvement of design assist in the early phase of the project. We can design things like, let's see, curtain walls, this and that.
Right.
We design them, but if they can be built the way we design, we are not sure. So if we can bring in design assist earlier in the project first, I think that's going to be beneficial to the owner.
Because that kind of speaks in a way to technology too. Anybody else?
Sure. I think, as early as possible from day one would be my answer. I think where collaboration has evolved is, our projects are becoming complex, right?
Yeah.
Our challenges are becoming complex. If we don't start collaborating from day one, then we're going to have issues later on. That's one aspect of it. But then other area of collaboration we are seeing is the kind of specialists we're bringing to the table. There's engineers, there's landscape architects, but consultants who do these really specialized modeling or analysis, they're brought on really early. Biomimicry consultants, you name it. We have some on our team. We partner with other companies as well to do that. So collaboration has really kind of become the corners, become like sort of the key in design, and now balancing that with meeting fatigue, for example, that we're dealing with in our day and age, where, in a world where everyone is all over the world and working from everywhere, we are from meetings after meetings after meetings. So balancing the beauty of collaboration with fatigue, I think that's a challenge that we have to deal with and address as well.
AJ? I'll come back to you, Maydi.
I think just to add to that, I agree, wanting to bring everybody in as soon as possible. I mean, it avoids rework down the road. None of us like to do any of that. Clients don't like it when we have to rework things. It affects the schedule. So anytime we could bring in the full consultant team from day one, get input from everybody, especially looking at just the basic conceptual planning, as early as site planning, making sure that we're engaged with a civil engineer, especially, working in the city of Houston, making sure we're understanding, the full site issues from day one so that we're not having to replan and, again, rework.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh,
go ahead.
Well, there was a gentleman last night at the event with Atlas Consulting, and he had a really, it speaks to both the last question and this question. So he was talking about how he worked on a project, it was a multifamily development, and so he does like technology integration, right? And they had sensors in the soap dispenser and in the restrooms, and so basically what happened was when they're reordering their supplies for the building, it's no longer based on a projection of someone saying, let me look into the crystal ball, but it's based on the data coming from these sensors. And that client was saving $500,000 a year on consumables, like hygienic items. So that's something that's really, the possibilities that are out there are really,
I agree with what everybody said on the panel. I think early engagement is key, as was discussed. But there's actually a major constituent that's part of that collaboration, which is sort of like the community that we're designing with.
Very nice, yes.
I've done a lot of projects that involve planning and either campus planning or has elements of urban design, or even in buildings that we're designing in community, getting, sort of that early buy-in where you gain the trust of the community so it doesn't feel like, oh, okay, you're building this. It could be a life sciences building that you're building, that there could be a way that, even though they may not have a day-to-day interaction with that building, because they're not scientists or people working in the building, there could be elements of it, because they're the one that have to live with this building staring at them for 30, 40, 50 years. So how do we engage them to make sure that, one, there's buy-in, but two, that we're building a building for them as well? How does the building meet the ground? What are the spaces around the building that they could benefit from? One project I worked on before I moved here, while I was at HTX, was a building for the University of Maryland campus in Baltimore, but it's right downtown, right? And there's all these communities that live next to the campus. So the lines are blurred between, a private building, an office building, a campus building. And in doing this project, the university actually sought to engage the community early because they wanted to create a plaza in front of this building that, the building becomes a backdrop for, but it also serves the community. Graduation, they could come there on the weekend and sit down and read a book, sit under a tree. So that sort of community buy-in as another representative at the table in terms of collaboration is very important.
Yeah, that's a good add. We do a lot of public space work in our practice, so we're engaging in those conversations, and it is critical to that. And sort of touching on that, we had talked about this in our practice session, but talk a little bit more. There was a lot of discussion from Manfredi and also from the previous panel about the whole idea of placemaking. So talk a little bit about how do you see that? How are you infusing that in your projects? How much attention are you paying to that? And how has that changed also for you in the terms of focus in your individual practices? And also, because you all are in kind of different practices, like from industrial to healthcare, sort of speak to it that way as well from your different perspectives. How are people looking at the placemaking aspects? Go for it, Kamal. She's ready to start.
I think placemaking is obviously a very, very key and central element to our focus. But an area that we're seeing, what's next in placemaking is cultural resilience, right? We're asking, our clients are starting to ask for that. Like, how are you actually making sure that the places that you're designing are culturally resilient?
Yeah.
And going back to Miday's point earlier about, the people we are designing, not just for inhabiting those spaces, but the surrounding communities, and addressing those are really important aspects of placemaking, I think.
Agreed.
I think one of the new things we're starting to see, and it relates back to workforce, is people want to be able to keep staff and looking at our industrial buildings in particular, people that have, the people that work in these buildings, the managers, the owners, they want to be able to support these people. And it's not just about amenities and office spaces anymore. We're seeing more and more wanting to design, outdoor seating areas, outdoor break rooms, just another outdoor environment for the employees working in these warehouse buildings and manufacturing spaces. Again, just to appeal to the workforce, and so people can maintain their staff and product output.
Yeah, we certainly saw a lot about that with the TMC3 project this morning and the importance. I mean, most of what he talked about was the spaces in between the buildings. So, we're obviously seeing lots more of that in terms of our focus. Are there any places that you would say really got in this region or anywhere that really, really got placemaking right, that really hit the nail on the head? Your projects, anybody's projects?
Oh, we're participating in a project right now that it appears that they're really getting placemaking right. It's the Allen over on Allen Parkway. And their incorporation, but the incorporation of the outdoor space in the pavilion and the retail and just really thoughtful about making not just like, okay, I'm going to my hotel room or I'm going to my thing and that place is nice, but how it all interplays together. I think it's going to be really awesome.
I think it was a success of that, whose ever brainchild this was. If anybody hasn't been to that sales office, you should go for one reason, if not others. The model, the classic old architectural models built with such beautiful precision, that model is like half the size of this table. It's all made out of Legos. Yeah. Was that your idea?
No, it's not mine. It's Roberto's.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
I think the idea of placemaking to me is always a moving target, right? Like what created great placemaking in the 50s is probably not relevant today, right? As trends come and go, it sort of affects these kind of places that we're creating, right? Right now, we're seeing what I personally call a hybridization across all sectors, where hospitality is sort of infusing itself into corporate offices, into healthcare, into airport spaces and whatnot. And I think it's actually a reflection of how even we as a human, and I think the pandemic, as I was mentioned in the earlier panel, is shining a light on that, about how interchangeable our activities are becoming, right?
That's a good point.
What used to be siloed efforts of me going to work for 9 to 5 and getting in the car, getting on the interstate is now blurred. I could be in my flip-flops and just open my laptop and work from home, which, again, so that sort of starts to throw into question, what exactly is placemaking really? And I think, to me, in terms of the physicality of a site or a building, I think placemaking has to be a place that is inclusive, that can take in, when I say inclusive, I'm not talking about just gender or race. It has to be a space where everyone is welcomed and everyone feels safe and everybody feels like it's built for them. I remember, and I'm not going to shame the architect, but one of the architects when I was younger did this great building, and it was written about in the press, and it's sort of, wow, avant-garde and like a different way of looking at buildings. And I remember looking at it in a magazine at the time. I was like, wow, that's really cool. And the first time I went to the city that it was built in, I drove around the building, and I'm like, where's the front door? Like, because it's like this avant-garde, like really cool looking, for lack of a better term. Right, it wasn't really
about the people.
But then I wonder, I'm like, how successful is this if my grandmother can come here and she can't find the front door to get into the building, right? So it goes to the inclusive part of making sure that what we're designing has everybody at heart. And everything, really. Plants is part of it. The birds that make the sound while you're in that plaza, the sort of ambient occurrences of how wind is, flows through the plaza, how we shape our buildings to sort of add to that. So to me, it's sort of like placemaking is like having that inclusivity aspect at heart to then act as a backdrop for people to occupy.
Yep.
So Shayla, to answer your question directly, I think my favorite place in the city of Houston is the Discovery Green area. Discovery Green facing the facelifted Georgia Brown.
Yep.
The largest, Texas largest Starbucks coffee next to it. And there's some nice restaurant around that neighborhood. And what makes me like that place the best, despite, of course, landscape design, which is awesome, is the activity that happening over there. There's always kids activity. There's water feature. In wintertime, they do skating on the ice. Although my office was like 10 minutes away, you have to walk there in summer hot sun. You're sweating already when you arrive that place.
You
But
feel
it's always a
cooler.
place that gives you this, peaceful mind just to watch kids playing. I think it's that sense of place that we're creating. That it's not just building places; it's also human activities.
Yep. Having an active. What about in terms of future? Like, what are we going to do? What do you guys think you're going to do? So there's a lot of placemaking. There's a lot of renderings. There's a lot of public spaces, and we saw some in the examples this morning. And to me, I think we're running the danger that these places are all looking the same. So what is it that you can infuse in your designs to not have them look like it's the same space, it's the same awning, it's the same, shade structure, it's the same Lowell furniture, it's the same spinning top? I'm like, what are you gonna do? Where are you gonna dig deep next time you start a new project to make it be special and unique?
Yeah, I was gonna use the word bespoke. And I used that word in a client meeting once. It didn't go well.
I didn't know what it meant until about a year ago.
Well, right, because the client was like, he's British, and they use the word bespoke in a different way. And he was like, I hate that word. But I think bespoke is at the heart of what we're talking about, right? Like, and again, I'm sort of drawing a general arc with some of the comments and points I was making earlier about engagement, early engagement, inclusivity, and all that stuff. Because part of making a project unique to place, the bespoke aspect of it, is actually collecting the data. When you start to make sure that I'm designing for you particularly, right? You have special needs. You're a unique individual, unique organization, unique community, really. That doing that early legwork before you even put pen to paper would automatically yield a different result.
Absolutely.
If it becomes a cookie cutter, then that's sort of when you go, there's ego here of the author that's not really focusing on what's unique to this community. I just want to do my vision and, impose it on the community. So I think that idea of early research, early engagement, partnering with the client in a very focused, targeted way would yield a different building. And even though the building might be in the same region, but they can look different depending on the immediate community.
It's a little bit something that Stephanie said from Gensler earlier that also ties to that, is that really, really early, back to that early collaboration, so you're getting everybody's point of view. Go ahead.
I also think, it is about, this is a research area I've personally at HOK been focused on, is looking at it from the lens of our senses or our sensory intelligence, and just the idea that, to make a space unique, you have to understand, again, that every human being reacts to a space differently. We are not all comfortable in a black jacket in an environment. We need different spatial configurations. And just, again, we look at it from a lens of, there's different people in a space. What does a day in the life of an individual look like in that space? And then looking at each demographic and carving their path, I think, is another way to make the space inviting, inclusive for everyone, not just a few people.
Yep, very nice.
I think it just goes back to, the basic design process that we all learned in school was, programming and site analysis. Like, what are our surroundings that we're designing to? How are we going to make this project specifically fit for this location. We don't want it just to be able to be plopped anywhere. What makes it and ties it to the site surroundings, and then who are we designing for? Who are the users of the space daily? Not just who owns the space, but who's visiting the spaces that make it unique.
Great.
I think we're lucky in a way because we're serving clients. You know, they're all different. They operate differently, and
Yep.
they serve different patients. So honestly, we never really face this challenge. I think our design is always diversified.
Good answer. Kim, how are we on time?
We are just about wrapping up. I mean, we have time for probably one last question for the panel or an audience question, whichever.
Yeah, would you want to take an audience question or two? Anybody have a question they want to ask?
I do want to mention that we do have the star of the Lego idea for the Allen sitting right here
thank
amongst
you.
us. So.
I'm glad I called you out on that. It's really amazing.
Anybody have any questions? Last question. We'll give a wrap-up question for the
Great.
panel.
Is there anything else you just want to impart that you've taken away from today that you want to take back and think about with your staff and with your creative process?
I would mention something that the panelist earlier from Gensler said. You know, we're very lucky to be here, right? You know, the pandemic has showed how quick things turn.
Right.
She also said something that resonated, where she said, let's not let a good pandemic go to waste,
Yeah.
right? Because I think out of this, out of any sort of strife or adversity comes innovation,
Right.
How we work, how we can reimagine our life balances, our choices and whatnot, the buildings we build. You know, right now, it was mentioned, you know, are people coming back to the office? Are we going to have to reinvent new ways of
Right.
working and whatnot? So I think us just sort of recognizing the moment that we're in and capitalizing on it, yes. I'm saying that not flippantly, you know, 800,000 people dead in the U.S. is serious business, right?
Right.
But sort of letting it propel us forward in terms of how creative we can be, I think is very important. And I'm glad, you know, I was like, something I've been really reticent to say out loud because it's
Go
a
for it.
pandemic. But the fact that she said it, I was like, oh, okay, it's going on across the industry, which hopefully is forcing us to be much more creative and innovative in how we
Yeah.
approach projects.
Great. Anybody else add anything?
I think I just want to say that we're lucky that we're in the city of Houston.
Yeah.
You know, David is gone, but I was about to pick up him on Boston because,
Yes.
you know, we don't have the cyclone, snowstorm that he's facing. You know, we have hot weathers, but it's only lasting for like 9 months. No big
Right.
deal.
We can use our spaces.
And our Texas Medical Center, the world's largest medical center,
Incredible.
size-wise, is the eighth largest CBD among the nation. It's actually larger than Boston's CBD.
Wow.
So we're very proud to be in Houston, and I think we're very lucky to be in Houston.
I do too. Well, thanks for everybody staying and listening. And one of the things I loved that we heard from the keynote speaker is, I'm gonna think about this from going out of here today, is the power of proximity. It really speaks to me. It's all about the whole thread of today is that collaboration, people, Fernando with his hugging, you know, it's just that power of proximity and how that then spurs us to be creative and to really focus in on what makes places really special for people. So thanks to the panel. Thanks for being part of this. Thanks everybody for coming.
Yes. Thank you, Sheila. Thank you, everyone.